just before lockdown in March 2020. And when the Nirbhaya happened, all of us, everybody spoke about the juvenile being the most repugnant. Sexual abuse was by the juvenile. And everybody said, oh, culture nahi tha, educated nahi tha, the class where he came from, it was there. What about the boys' locker room? This is a public school in the capital city of India where these boys were talking about raping their own classmate girls. They were not talking about having sex, which is like an orgasmic pleasure getting out of sex. They were talking about violent sex. And that was a wishful fantasy. And that's the kind of masculinity which is seeped in our youth also today. So boys' locker room manifests that such violence exists freely, in masculinity, in the imagination of the youth. We really need to move beyond that. It's manifest as toxic masculinity. You're told, be a man, suppress your emotions, don't cry. You can't be a victim. Violence is part of what is considered as being masculine. So it's replicated, often in Dehati terms, the man is asked ki kaisa aadmi hai, aurat ko bhi control nahi kar sakta. That's the kind. Even the police said this. I remember taking a case of domestic violence, and that whole notion was that the police woman was actually asking the woman ki tankha nahi dete ho aadmi ko to aur kya karega. This was the kind of an attitude. It's really not. We need to have sensitization on that quarter. We need to have workshops for police, judges and others who really need to understand this. And COVID hasn't made a difference here. It's really made a different kind of a problematic. And I want to acknowledge feminism in India for the caricatures here, where the man is clueless in the household because he's been told to be the breadwinner. He's been told to do the work and he's lost his jobs and otherwise. And his lockdown anxiety doesn't know how to cope with it in other ways as well. This is not to be defensive about men's violence, but to understand it. I mean, we need to, so that we can tackle it for our boys, whether they are children or our sons or our brothers or others within the family. And my experience is that today we have a reverse kind of socialization happening. The socialization is happening from going back. The kids go back and tell their parents as well. I mean, we had workshops on violence that on self-defense that we did, and we threw in certain workshops on legal training and others, because otherwise, the students would say, or the parents would say, feminists to hamari bachon ko bigaad denge. So we threw that in as part of self-defense. And the children's parents actually came for the valedictory after that 1 week workshop and told us it's been a learning for us. We have learned because they come and tell us, अब आपको पता नहीं ये act ऐसे है और ऐसे नहीं करना चाहिए, वो सही नहीं है, ये गलत है. And that is so important. It's changing. That reverse socialization is happening. We need to recognize what we are learning from our children. I mean, technology, we are not tech savvy in that sense of the term. So that really needs to be brought in. But the point we are trying to make is that violence is not that simply that physical or biological act. It's not that marpeet karna. It's much more. It's located in our social and cultural context. Any kind of violence that we are speaking about, whether it's sexual harassment, whether it's domestic violence, whatever it is, it's the psyche which needs to be looked at rather than the change that needs to come in. And I spoke about 1 billion rising, so I'm just ending my presentation very quickly. But that's a short film which is giving different kind of notions of 1 billion rising short film on different kind of violence that is there. Billion Rising Against Violence. The film was, you have all the kind of in films when you have Salman Khan's dialogues of प्यार से दे रहे हैं, ले लो वरना थप्पड़ मार के भी दे सकते हैं. I mean, in dialogue पे इतनी तालियां बजती हैं. Or songs which have become so popular, probably my generation more than yours, from Tu haan kar ya na kar, tu hai meri kiran. You know, that whole notion, there's no context of, you know, consent there. Whether you say no or yes, your mind, it really should be whether you say yes or no, I'm going to respect your decision, Kiran. But that doesn't come into the picture because consent is not there. And a lot of times when I'm, you know, discussing this in refresher courses, they say, ma'am, he was a psychopath. I say, correct. ऐसे ही psychopaths roam कर रहे हैं बाहर जो मेरे गांव में है. So we need to tackle that because there are many psychopaths. We are building and creating these psychopaths. You have acid throwing, you have genital mutilation, you have domestic violence, all kinds of, you know, concerns that come in, which really need to be, you know, looked at. So various kinds of violence against women, from domestic violence, marital rape, femicide, early marriage, child marriage, which again is a violence, human trafficking, sexual violence, a female genital mutilation, and son preference for dowry related, if we look at countries like ours. And now online digital violence, which is happening without, which is a major, major issue that we need to tackle because we don't know how it's going to be. Morphed images, you just misuse, you know, pictures and everything, you know, and the way harassment happens online, which really needs to be tackled when you look at the Bosch Act in future as well. So this whole cycle of violence has to do, of course, with the power dynamic, has to do with that. And that's something which will come up when you're discussing the Act itself. Despite so many laws related to women in India, tremendous amount, too many. We are the most rights-based constitution in the world. The maximum amendments that have taken place, and we keep adding in more laws. I don't know if that helps. Mumta is going to tell us more. So with all kinds of violence that we are looking at, you know, to change. But I can't finish a session on gender deconstruction without talking about the fact that gender is not a binary. It is a non-binary because often the cisgender is taken, which is the default identity that society accepts, is taken as a given. So anything else is, you know, kind of a no-no in that sense. So beyond the gender binary, we need to look at sexual orientation. In other words, who do I love? Do I love a man or do I love a woman? So lesbian, gay, bisexual, asexual, heterosexual, pansexual, what have you. And then, of course, is the gender identity. Who am I? Am I a man or am I a woman? So transgender, transsexual, transvestite, intersex, gender fluid, gender non-binary, and I'm told there are many more terms. I'm still learning every time, you know, it comes up. Sorry?
If you explain the gender identities, like what they would mean in terms of how they would
be projected. If we have time, we'll do that. But I actually am not very clear on this as well. You know, even when you talk about the queer LGBTQ++, where does it intersect with a lesbian, for instance, or a binary? You know, when you're talking about in what way? There, I mean, these are segments which, one, scientifically you need to look at, but also recognize because it is not, even though there are laws in place, it's not something which is acceptable. If I'm sitting on a panel and I had somebody sitting next to me and I had to ask her, him, because now it's she, her, they, them, whatever, that how would you like me to address you? Because you don't know. And in fact, there was a beautiful film for gender identity, since you're saying, on Netflix called Disclosures. If anybody's seen that. Absolutely beautiful, where the protagonist, one of them, actually says that I want the inside of me to be on the outside of me, because that's not what shows what she or he is feeling, but what one is looking at is how we judge the person looking like a man or looking like a woman. And that's a sad bit because that is destroying this entity, whatever it is. And we don't know, we don't recognize that, because how would you feel that? And I thought Satyame Vijayate, that episode of Amir Khan did quite a lot of justice to it, bringing in people from, you know, the transgender and others. There was somebody who'd had a sex change operation called Ghazal. And absolutely, you know, and the whole identification was that how would you feel if it was different, how would you feel having sex with a man? She asked Amir Khan. So he said, I would be repulsed. So she said, I would be repulsed if I have it with a man. So do you understand that? So, so I think these are things that need a lot of deconstruction. I'm probably not the best person to, kind of say that, because I'm still learning. But we still need to, recognize and respect, because we can put all these laws in place. But very recently, and there's a group I've been put on, which is a transgenders group, where a teacher has actually been thrown out of the school, and this is when the trans person was harassed by the students, being told that you're neither a man nor a woman, what are you going to teach us? And they actually kicked the person out. And these are issues that we need to deal with and understand, but it needs sensitivity, and we also need to understand and empathize in various ways, but we don't know enough. I mean, and let's be open and ask, how would you like it? How do I do it? Because we don't know, I don't know. And I mean, I've called transgenders on human rights workshops to take a session, and it's amazing how brilliantly they're addressing the issue and saying that put yourself in this situation and don't treat that as the normal. Then how would you feel? Is it not a violation of our body? And now with the decriminalization of sex, which has happened just about a month back, which is really not a big deal, and you have this whole notion, and she says that I don't want it. It's up to me. And it's very interesting because a professor in Jamia, Professor Shoini Ghosh, in Mass Communication Centers, made a beautiful film 20 years back. So when I was screening it, I told Shoini, please come and introduce it in the refresher course, human rights refresher. And she said, it's been 20 years since I made this film on Sonar Gachi. It's in Bengali. It had subtitles. And 20 years later, while this was decriminalized, we were screening it. And we saw how real the issues were still. So the change is not really happening, recognizing work in that sense of the term. So it's really creating gendered systems and spaces, basically. And if we just look at the binary, the male works outside of home, and the woman is supposed to be inside the home and outside the home as well. Kitchen is, the spaces that are occupied, and space is a very beyond the physical space kind of concept for feminists. So we're not looking at just the physical space. It's the mindset, it's the emotions, it's a whole lot of arena. Spaces are so gendered, and we are creating. And here, genders beyond the binary are the most kind of exploited, if you like. The most debilitating impact is on them that we really need to, recognize. So the social spaces are in that kind of a hegemonic masculinity, gendered socialization, a cyclical process, this power inequality, and the constant social reproduction of patriarchy and patriarchal society, which is built in, which is thrown in there. So we really need to deconstruct structures, systems, stereotypes, gender, identities or otherwise, and construct equality in various ways. This is my world of expectations, my world of do's and don'ts, my world of belonging, my world of relationships that are intimate, demanding, compulsive, and controlling. Multiple roles and relationships that I am in push and pull me in many directions. I often lose touch with my being, my process of lose touch with my rhythm with the self. Thank you all.